Support for WUWM podcast comes from Life Navigators, your disability partner, offering disability services for over 75 years. More on their family resources at lifenavigators.org or their helpline, 414-774-6255.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today we'll learn about last week's record-breaking severe weather. Then we'll look at the potential effects of ending the Knowles-Nelson Stewardship program in Wisconsin.
With no increases in stewardship or any kind of stewardship, we're going to not see any increases in any kind of outdoor recreational opportunities.
Plus, we'll speak with the filmmakers of the documentary Your Attention Please, which looks at the impact technology can have on our lives.
Even though it does wrestle with some very dark and difficult topics, and it takes an honest look at the scale of the problem that we're facing, it, importantly looks at people who are actively working towards solutions.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. We'll start with a look at the severe weather that hammered the state last week. A record-breaking number of severe weather and tornado warnings were issued. 45 of Wisconsin's 72 counties saw a tornado warning last week. The busiest day was Friday. A tornado in Marathon County damaged at least 75 homes. And flooding is still a risk in some areas, as river levels remain high. WUWM's Maayan Silver is joined by Kevin Scharfenberg, the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Green Bay. Here he is with the latest storm information.
Is it true that the National Weather Service has confirmed 19 tornadoes since April 13th alone?
Well, we are up to 23 tornadoes so far in Wisconsin in April, which would actually match the average number of annual tornadoes in Wisconsin for an entire year. And we still have May, June, and July to go, which are generally our busiest month for severe weather and tornadoes.
My number one question is, what's going on?
Well, we have had an unusually active storm track going from the Northern Rockies into Canada. That's strong. Those strong storm systems moving from the Northern Rockies into Canada have been bringing up unusually warm and humid air for April. That's the kind of storm track we would usually expect in June or July, bringing severe thunderstorms. It's just happening a lot earlier than usual this year.
And one question is, why that is. What do we know and what don't we know about how climate change is factoring into these formations and these storms and severe weather?
It's a little hard to pinpoint climate change as the cause for any particular severe thunderstorm or tornado event. What we do know is spring is warming up a little earlier than usual in recent years, with warm temperatures and humid air into Wisconsin in April a little bit more frequently in April. That means the storm season is getting a little bit longer. The severe storm season is now lasting maybe earlier into April and May instead of just June or July.
As we were talking about the final April tally, do you think it could be as high as 24 tornadoes if all the radar-confirmed events end up getting rated that way?
Right now, the National Weather Service is continuing to survey potential tornado damage across Wisconsin from these events in April. We might end up with a number higher than 23 once all of those survey results are in.
Can you give us a short science lesson on the conditions that allow a tornado to be formed, like what happened last week?
Well, to get severe thunderstorms that produce tornadoes, you have to have several ingredients that come together. You need sufficiently warm and humid air. That's the fuel for thunderstorms that they feed off of to become really intense and potentially produce tornadoes. But to get those tornadoes, you also have to have strong wind shear in the atmosphere. So you have to have wind coming from a different direction as you go up into the atmosphere from the surface. And it also has to increase as you go up in the atmosphere. So you put those two ingredients together, strong, unstable air and wind shear in the atmosphere. Any thunderstorm in that environment, you have to watch out for the potential for tornadoes.
And how does the National Weather Service confirm a tornado?
The National Weather Service will often send survey teams out into communities where there has been reported wind damage that might be associated with a tornado. So a team will go out and look at what kind of damage occurred, whether the damage is concentrated in a very narrow path, and how severe the damage is, the way the debris flew in the air. Those sorts of things tell us kind of as a clue whether that was due to a tornado or not. And those teams have been very active across Wisconsin for the last few days, surveying wind damage to determine where tornadoes occurred.
In Marathon County, that's in central Wisconsin near Wausau, there were at least 75 homes that were damaged. The sheriff there said he'd never seen devastation like that. What do you know about what happened there?
The community of Ringgold in Marathon County was hit very hard. The degree of damage to some of the homes was really remarkable, with all of the exterior walls and roofs blown off some homes. And it was very dangerous to folks who were there who didn't take cover in their basements. So the type of damage we saw in Ringgold is very unusual for Wisconsin any time of year. It was a very intense EF3 rated tornado, and the folks there really had a lot of damage to contend with.
You're tuned into Lake Effect. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with Kevin Scharfenberg, meteorologist in charge with the National Weather Service in Green Bay. So I asked it earlier, but I guess I'll kind of ask a little bit more. The big question on everyone's mind is why, and why did Wisconsin have so many tornadoes last week?
The conditions across Wisconsin last week were really perfect for tornado development, with strong wind shear in the atmosphere, very unstable and humid air, unusually humid for April. And those conditions came together over a large part of Wisconsin a couple of times last week, which has led to a number of tornado reports.
And the record set for tornadoes in Wisconsin was in 2005, with 62 tornadoes confirmed over the year. Do last week's tornadoes speak to a larger trend, or does it seem like an aberration?
We see a pretty wide variation in the number of tornadoes per year in Wisconsin. Some years only have a few, some years can have several dozen. The number of tornadoes we've had in Wisconsin so far in 2026 has been a lot, but we see a wide variation in the number of tornadoes from year to year across the state. Some years we only have a few, some years we have many dozens. The start we've had in 2026 does not necessarily mean we'll have a lot more tornadoes this year, but we are just getting into the heart of storm season in Wisconsin. So this is a reminder that we should be prepared. Be prepared for more tornadoes as we go through the months of April, May, and into the summer, because that's the peak of storm season in Wisconsin.
And what should people know about staying as prepared and safe as possible during a tornado warning?
Well, one of the first things you can do to be prepared for tornadoes is to have a plan. Know where you're going to go, if you're at home, if you're at work, or even if you're on the road and a tornado warning is issued and hopefully received on your cell phone. So you'll know what to do when the time comes. So have a plan, know how to get the information, even if it's at night. How might you wake up? One way we really suggest is having a NOAA weather radio, or having alerts set up on your phone so you can hear them at night during stormy weather. Have a plan and be ready to enact it as you get those warnings.
What is the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning?
A tornado watch means that the conditions are setting up. They're favorable today for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. So they cover a wide area, maybe half of Wisconsin, about that size of an area. A tornado watch just means you should be paying attention. The conditions are favorable for tornadoes. A tornado warning means that one has been sighted either by a spotter or on radar, or is expected to develop really in the next few minutes. So that's when immediate action has to be taken to protect yourself.
Kevin from the National Weather Service in Green Bay, thank you so much for speaking to me.
Happy to be with you.
Kevin Scharfenberg is the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Green Bay. He spoke with WUWM's Maayan Silver. Whenever you hear storm sirens go off or get an alert on your phone, it's important to have a plan in place for what to do next. Lake Effect Sam Woods is joined by Wisconsin Emergency Management's Public Information Officer Katie Rusnellos to talk about how to prepare when severe weather strikes.
There's a whole host of other weather things that can happen during the warmer months when you get into spring and summer. You get thunderstorms that can produce high winds, that can produce heavy rains, that can cause flooding. There's lightning, and then there's also tornadoes. And the thing is, tornadoes can happen any time of year. And we saw that in 2024 in February, where that was the first February tornado in the state. But there has been a tornado recorded in Wisconsin in every single month of the year. So some of these things aren't just based on spring or summer. Sometimes they can happen in fall and winter as well.
So when thinking about extreme spring and summer weather here in Wisconsin, what are some things that you'd like us to keep in mind?
Some things to keep in mind with severe weather season is when there is flooding, whether that's river flooding or flash flooding, please do not drive your vehicle into flooded water. You don't know how deep it is. You don't know what's in it. The same goes for walking in the water. We've all seen those videos of people sloshing in the water, walking up and down the streets, or kids playing in it. The problem with that is you don't know what's in the water. There could be liquids that are contaminating the water. There could be dangerous items that you don't see because they're covered in water that you walk on. And with floodwaters, it only takes 6 inches to knock someone over, and that could potentially be a deadly situation that you would find yourself in. Other things to pay attention to would be tornadoes. If a tornado occurs, you'll hear an outdoor siren sometimes if your community has them. That's not 100% foolproof, because think about in those summer months when you have all your windows closed and the air conditioner is running, you're not going to hear that outdoor siren. So it's important to have multiple ways to receive emergency alerts. That could include having those wireless emergency alerts on your phone turned on for emergency weather information. What happens with those is the National Weather Service will send then a little alert to your area where you are located at, and it will tell you, hey, there's a tornado warning. There's, take shelter now. Other things would be having an NOAA weather radio, and those are good things to have because not only can you plug them in to an electrical outlet, they also can have batteries in there. So if there's a power outage, you can still get those alerts, even though the power's not on, because it is a battery-operated radio. And other ways to get those alerts are getting a weather app on your phone that can give those weather alerts to you, getting a phone call from family and friends saying, hey, I just saw that there's a tornado near your area, or even getting that information from your local TV or radio station.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for joining me on Lake Effect. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Katie Rusnellos is Wisconsin Emergency Management's Public Information Officer. She spoke with Lake Effect Sam Woods last year. You can find more storm coverage and resources at wuwm.com. The Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Fund will likely come to an end this June. Earlier this year, the state Senate failed to reauthorize funding for the program. The Stewardship Fund has helped protect 750,000 acres of land statewide by investing roughly $1.3 billion to protect Wisconsin's natural landscape. The Stewardship Fund has been working with government and nonprofits since 1989. But in recent years, it's faced more politicization. WUWM's Eric Vaughn Fellow Maria Peralta Ariano is joined by DNR Facilities and Lands Bureau Director Terry Bay to learn more.
So we're talking about the Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Program, which was originally authorized in 1989. And since 1989, there's been a number of adjustments, reauthorizations of the program. Those readjustments and reauthorizations have now come to an end through the years. So without reauthorization, the program ends on June 30th of this year. with that coming forward, the governor proposed in his biennium budget a reauthorization of the program. And what the governor had proposed is a 10-year reauthorization of the program, and that would be at $100 million a year, so for a total reauthorization of $1 billion of the program. Since then, since that was proposed and that was rejected in the budget by the full legislature, two separate bills have been introduced by the legislature. I don't have the exact numbers, but one from each side of the House for reauthorizing the program. Each of those reauthorization efforts had its own, position on what the program should be doing and what the program shouldn't be doing at different authorized funding levels. Nowhere near what the governor had proposed.
So are you able to describe where those party lines are forming, what Republicans want from any form of reauthorization, what Democrats may want?
The Republicans' concern about the program that have been, indicated to us, has been oversight of the program. So there was a case that came up to the Supreme Court that questioned the Joint Finance Commission's authority on overseeing and approving land acquisitions for the department. So statute required, in general, the Joint Finance Commission to approve land acquisitions. That was challenged in the Supreme Court, and the reason it was challenged was the Joint Finance Committee at the time was not putting land acquisitions on their agenda. So we had a lot of land acquisitions that were sitting for literally years because they would not bring them up and put them on their agenda. That all came to a head, and a lot of political and legal folks got at it. The Attorney General obviously was involved. It eventually rose up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Attorney General's office, in favor of the Attorney General, in that the Joint Finance Commission and other subcommittees didn't have that authority to do that. And that really brought the stewardship program into focus, and kind of this punching bag for those reasons.
And then how are you guys preparing for the end of the program? Is there any way that the stewardship fund is appealing to more donors outside of the state government? Is it possible that the public could donate, or how are you guys just preparing for that?
I think that's an excellent question, because it's obviously a daily conversation here of a program that's existed for so long. Donations can be received by the department, but we cannot solicit the donations. And donations are a big part of the program. Based on your question, I just ran as fast as I could a quick search that since 2004, the department has received 4 acquisitions, $34 million in private donations. And that $34 million has been leveraged against stewardship funds and federal funding. So we use those private dollars and match with stewardship funding or federal dollars. And those donations can be cash or land donations, or what we call bargain sales, where a landowner will sell us their land at a much reduced rate, and that can be a donation. Very generous of these donors to donate this, to make those donations to the department, and then we leverage it, as I say, with the stewardship and federal dollars. However, we cannot go out and actively solicit those donations. The donations can be received by the department, but we don't have a campaign to raise those funds. The other thing is it's a match. So those donations are matched against stewardship and federal, so it only covers part of the project. We don't have any funding to cover the other half if stewardship ends, besides the federal dollars. And the federal dollars, as we see in the news, have been limited as well.
how is the end of the stewardship fund affecting any current projects or land acquisitions that may be going on?
I think a great question. Land acquisitions, like buying any kind of real estate, takes time. And if we have negotiations going on and we cannot come to a conclusion on those donations before the end of June, we won't be able to do the acquisition. That is pretty much as simple as that.
For sure. So
I think the one thing I want to maybe bring up about stewardship as we have this conversation is I think stewardship is sometimes a little misconceived as it's only doing land acquisition for the department. And the stewardship program, actually, the majority of the funding is going to non-DNR partners, local units of government and non-profit conservation organizations is where the majority of the funds go. And those programs will end.
So through the years that we have had the stewardship program, what have been the impacts on conservation that they have been able to help achieve for the state? And how does this affect the future of conservation in Wisconsin and what we're able to do?
Yeah, just a great question. I look at the stewardship program continues to bring awareness to the importance of natural resources that we have and enjoy in Wisconsin. So the reducing or eliminating Knowles-Nelson will affect conservation, I think, in three key areas. The first is obviously we'll see a reduced habitat or fragmentation of habitat. And habitat, without having habitat, it greatly affects our natural ecological systems in the state that exist, our wildlife, right? Our plants and our animals need ecologically accepted areas to thrive and grow. And the loss of that specific habitat or reduction of it or fragmentation of it really threatens that wildlife and that biodiversity of species in our given regions of the state. I think the second point is without any kind of conservation program, its stewardship program, is we really look at it's the protection of water quality in the state. The natural landscapes that we all enjoy that include rivers and lakes may be protected by stewardship through boundaries that we create around those watersheds to help improve that water runoff. And it also improves the resiliency of flooding and protecting of our flooding by creating those areas, those bogs, those marshes that help with the surges of floods that we see in areas and that. And then finally, we just always see it as a support to the local economies with no increases in stewardship or any kind of stewardship. We're going to not see any increases in any kind of outdoor recreational opportunities. Wisconsin tourism, one of our largest industries, multi-billion-dollar industry in the state, are always looking for maintaining our recreational infrastructure and supporting our local communities for new opportunities for people visiting our local communities. And that is going to subside without stewardship.
What are your thoughts on the ending of the program fund? What worries you the most about this? What are you hoping for the future?
I think what worries me the most is this great state that we live in and the great outdoor opportunities offered in the state of Wisconsin. There's a quote by Gathering Waters, which is one of the collaborations of land trusts. And Gathering Waters noted that, Wisconsin doesn't protect as much land as our neighbors in Michigan and Minnesota. And that's really going to affect our overall climate, our what we enjoy in doing outside and those recreational values and our water qualities. So it really concerns me is how this will affect this absolute great state that we live in and that outdoor recreational value. we all saw the giant uptick in outdoor recreation during the pandemic. People got outdoors, and we had all these opportunities in the state of Wisconsin to get outdoors. And it really concerns me on what that will do to the overall state on a program so important as this.
Terry Bay is the Facilities and Land Bureau Director for the Wisconsin DNR. He spoke with WUWM's Eric Vaughn Fellow, Maria Peralta Ariano. In about 15 minutes, we'll tell you about Milwaukee Film Cine Sin Frontera's program. But first, we'll speak with the filmmakers of the new documentary, Your Attention Please, a film that unpacks the impact social media and technology have on our lives. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. Since the dawn of the internet, online spaces have been rapidly changing and eating up more of our time. Social media and attention-driven apps are shaping how young people think and feel and how they learn. A new documentary called Your Attention Please highlights the real-world consequences of social media and how it reshapes all of us. It also shows how a new generation of parents and teens are fighting back against big tech's agenda to keep us scrolling. The film is showing at the Milwaukee Film Festival, and to learn more, Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski is joined by director Sarah Robin, writer and co-writer Jack LeMay, and film participant Kristen Bride. A warning to listeners, this conversation does include the topic of suicide.
So Sarah, we'll start with you. With so many potential directions a film about tech can use and take, can you share how your vision and focus for the documentary came together?
Yes, for sure. And it was a tricky thing because it is a very large subject, as you say, so whittling it down was not an easy task. But what was really important to me from the start and to the whole team was that we create something that inspires action and it gives people hope. This is not another doomsday tech doc. This is a hopeful film. And even though it does wrestle with some very dark and difficult topics and it takes an honest look at the scale of the problem that we're facing, it, importantly looks at people who are actively working towards solutions and offers viewers a whole range of solutions of how we can approach this. So that was kind of the organizing thought around it. How do we make something emotionally impactful that gets the solutions across and gets people excited to become involved?
And to kind of go into the dark territory you got to lay down to explain the impact, tech was supposed to be this great equalizer of sorts, but what are its true impacts, especially for teenagers, both when it comes to education and their personal lives?
Yeah, what we've been seeing is that because technology right now is designed to keep us on the devices as long as possible, the business model, right, is engagement-based, so the longer we're on these devices, the more money these companies make. That disrupts a whole plethora of healthy, normal functioning, and I think it's particularly visible when it comes to young people. So anything from ability to focus, ability to socialize, to connect with people, stable sense of self, self-confidence, trust, trusting relationships with friends, all of that has been impacted by technology in ways that are often very invisible, and I think it took, over a decade for us to wrestle with this and get to a place where we now have scientific evidence that actually shows the links to social media. And so we've seen really a youth mental health crisis that in a lot of ways it's not reducible to just technology, but in a lot of ways it is connected with technology and with just how much time young people spend on social media and on phones.
Right, because we can kind of feel the soft impact, like just as people interacting with this. But Jack, I'm wondering if you can speak to this about all the deep dive and research it takes to quantify that, especially when presenting it in a documentary so it's clearly laid out for people about the impacts.
Yeah, I think that this experience was for us like a crash course in a survey and what this has done to humanity at large. We spoke to Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, who gave us a lot of hard data about teen usage of social media over 3 to 5 hours and how that doubles risk of mental health issues. We sort of tried to balance the film between these two worlds of looking at the quantitative effect, because data is impactful and people want to understand it scientifically, but also we're not really going to push this needle forward unless we look at the subjective experience. What is this doing to real families, real people? What is the cost? And I think that's where the powerful story of Kristen Bride really is the emotional center and heart of the film.
Kristen, to bring you in, you're joining us via Zoom today for listeners. You're a participant in the documentary Your Attention Please with the stark title of Parent Survivor. You lost your son, Carson, to suicide due to online harassment. But before we get into that and everything that's happened since, I'm hoping you can start us off by just sharing more about your son.
Sure. Carson is my youngest son. He was the shining light in our family, very high energy, great sense of humor, made everyone laugh, started to get into acting and was really talented. And as a result of losing him, we have a very big hole in our family and in our hearts.
With the doc and kind of framing your story, Carson's story, and a lot of families that joined you in your efforts, it starts with phone use. So you got a cell phone for Carson in 8th grade, right? That was the first time. How did things start changing after he got his phone?
Well, he was the last kid in his class to get an iPhone. It was a really old hand-me-down, no apps on it. And we had really hoped that he could stay away from the apps. But by the time he got to 10th grade, he was telling us that that is the way all the kids are connecting, is over Snapchat, and I feel left out. And so we allowed him to have Snapchat in 10th grade, and he did not make it to 11th grade.
Can you share a bit more about things you discovered after Carson's death? I think a lot of people listening, especially parents, cannot imagine an unimaginable situation, but it does happen to a lot of families, and how you managed to take your grief and use it for action.
Well, what we learned, because there were no signs that he was suicidal. In fact, he wrote his upcoming work schedule on the kitchen calendar the night before, and we celebrated his first real job. And in the past, Carson had told me about bullying incidents at school, but he did not talk about the cyberbullying that was happening to him online. And I learned after his death that this is very common. Kids don't want to have their device taken away because they're so addicted to it, or they're afraid of being a snitch. And so he kept it all to himself, and he received 2 weeks of really harassing messages over an anonymous app that had been integrated into Snapchat. So we knew he had Snapchat, and we were checking his phone. We did not know that Snapchat had allowed this anonymous app, YOLO, into their platform. And when you have anonymous apps, if you look at the history of these apps, when you give kids the ability to be anonymous and post messages about others, you can only imagine what that does in the teen world in creating drama. And this particular app had promised kids that they would monitor for cyberbullying and reveal the names of those who do so and ban them from the app. Yet the last search on Carson's phone was for hacks to find out who was doing this to him. We later learned that the company only had one employee. The app went viral because of the cyberbullying that it facilitated. And they really had no way of identifying cyberbullies, or were they even monitoring it. And I found that out the hard way by reaching out to them after Carson's death. And I was completely ignored.
Yeah, I do want to talk about this. This is not just a YOLO app problem. It's with a lot of social media platforms. How did you find out what was, quote unquote, accountable versus not? Like, what is liability, what is not when it comes to all these social media platforms?
Well, we ended up actually suing YOLO, and we did win that court case for product misrepresentation, which is what it was. But you're right that this is not something that is just pertains to YOLO. I work with so many other survivor parents who have reported things online to other big platforms like Snapchat and the Meta platforms, only to be ignored or being told that it meets community guidelines when it definitely does not. And that's really part of the business model. They want to keep kids online longer so that they can extract their data and then sell it to advertisers. And what better way to do that by causing intentional drama online that keeps kids hooked? Because if you're not being bullied, you want to see what the other kids are saying or want to make sure that they don't target you next.
And now there's a long story that is ongoing, but a key part of this documentary is, Kristen, your efforts along with other parents and groups to advocate for the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA. So, Sarah, we'll start with you, and just thinking about logistics and the long game of a documentary. When did KOSA and this storyline kind of incorporate itself, or was this a starting point for you?
So the starting point initially was telling Kristen's story of what had happened to her. And then that naturally led to, okay, what is she doing now? And the lawsuit at the time is so slow moving that it's a little challenging. It can be done, but I knew with the film that I wanted to have it done in 2 to 3 years because I could feel that the subject matter was getting more and more important. And I thought and tech moves so fast, so I just thought we don't have that much time. So I was like, I need something that happens a little faster than the lawsuit to be kind of our narrative thread. And the push for KOSA just naturally became that as, momentum was gained around that. And then when we had, that historic vote in the Senate with this overwhelming bipartisan support for the bill, we really thought, wow, this is happening. And for quite some time in making the film, we were like, this is going to be a really good news, happy movie. And in some ways it still is, but it also has some really heartbreaking moments in it now.
Exactly. And Kristen, you've spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill meeting with lawmakers, advocating for KOSA and other action to help check industries that have gone unchecked for 30 years and keep adapting. It's like a constant catch-up game. What are some of your takeaways from the experience on Capitol Hill, both good and bad?
Well, the good news is that this is something that is bipartisan. Everybody cares about kids. And we saw that with that historical vote in the Senate for KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, in July 2024. But unfortunately, another part of Washington, D.C. Are the big tech lobbyists, and they have incredible amounts of money. And we definitely have to make this an election issue so that our elected officials are standing for families and not for big tech.
Now, Sarah, as you mentioned at the top, it's not a doomsday. There is hope in this. And I'm hoping all of you can share where you found the hope and what you highlighted to show here's the alternate to what's happening.
Yeah, I think to me, hope is seeing in how many areas people are active and taking risks and taking initiative and putting themselves on the line to push this forward and to really invite us to question what has our relationship with technology become and how do we want it to be reshaped? How do we want it to be different? Right now we have a model that's a very extractive model, right? It takes our attention, it takes our time, it generates money for a few powerful companies. And yet technology can be so beautiful and can do so much. And I think even in its quite broken form, social media still can help us connect. It certainly helped us connect with people who are now in the film. How can we capture that initial idealistic vision of technology and bring that back and turn it into something that actually helps us connect and helps us be better, helps us solve these quite massive problems that we're up against as a society? I really do believe technology can be that force for good, and there's more of a desire now to bring that about, which gives me a huge amount of hope.
Jack, could you share a couple of the examples that are in the film?
Absolutely. One really striking example is we went to Brockton High School in Massachusetts, and they had just implemented about 6 months prior their first phone-free policy. So the year before, kids were used to sort of having phones in the classroom, texting all day, sending Snapchats around, and now it was cold turkey. They went back to the way we used to do it, right? And that was a pretty shocking thing for them. So it was actually a really entertaining day in a lot of ways because we got to see a lot of them go, yeah, I was not having that. I was not looking forward to go to school. That was tough. What they found over the next year is that they actually really enjoyed what they found on the other side of that experiment. The phone in a lot of ways can get in between that relationship you have with yourself and with others. So I think, I found hope in Brockton High School. I found hope in looking at the Offline Club in Amsterdam. And Trisha Prabhu, one of our subjects, was cyberbullied, and she really turned that experience into a desire to figure out how to design social media differently and create these nudges that would encourage users to remember there's like a real person on the other end. Really, the film for us was an experience to see all these different people come together and show how, in all these different ways, we all fit into this puzzle together. And really, we are resilient, and human beings will be able to thrive again when this stuff is taken away or changed to be more positive.
For you, Kristen, and especially being so embedded in this work, what continues to give you hope and the motivation to keep going with this work, even if it reminds you of the big hole in your life?
Early on, I had to make a decision. Am I going to rip the Band-Aid off and go public with this and try to save other families from this horrible tragedy, or just lay in bed and cry all day? And I chose to go forward and become an advocate. I've never regretted it. When I first started 6 years ago, I felt completely alone. I didn't feel like people were talking about these harms so much. And now, almost 6 years later, we just have such a strong group of survivor parents who have lost their kids to so many different harms. And I feel like even with non-survivor parents, we are creating a movement for change. And everyone can do their part to make a change in their life to reclaim their humanity.
Sarah Robin is the director, and Jack LeMay is the writer and co-creator of Your Attention Please. We also heard from Kristen Bride, who's a participant in the documentary. It'll be showing at the Milwaukee Film Festival this Thursday at the Downer Theater. After a break, we'll speak with the programmer of Milwaukee Film's Cine Sin Frontera program, which features films about the identities and cultures within the Latine diaspora. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. It's been 10 years since Claudia Guzman and Jeanette Martin started Milwaukee Film's Cine Sin Frontera's program. And after a few years, it's finally back to being programmed by a Milwaukeean, artist and filmmaker Paula Lovo. WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez spoke with Lovo at the Cine Sin Frontera's kickoff party about what to expect at this year's fest.
What does it mean to be the programmer for Cine? And what does that mean for Milwaukee, too?
Yeah, so I think, I'm really excited to be programming Cine Sin Fronteras because it's a program that I have loved for so long. There was programmers in the community who were just like really showing up for community. So it felt like big shoes to fill, but honored to try giving my take on it. And so, I'm somebody who's from Milwaukee, from the South Side, who is a filmmaker and thinks a lot about stories coming from Latin America, but also just like how expansive it can be. We're not just narratives that get repeated often in mainstream media.
You have a beautiful film from last year about Donato Palatero. We'll just plug that. But what does it mean to program? You're kind of talking about a little bit of that goes into it, and then we will talk about the program too, because there's a couple that I want to get your take on, because I'm so excited about it. But what goes into actually programming? And when you think about Afro-Caribbean, Latino, South American, Mexican-American, all of the diaspora that goes into Latino, or I feel like that's such a reductive thing, but the culture, what goes into programming, all of that.
Totally. So I think my jumping point was I really wanted to screen Juan Gabriel in Bellas Artes from the 90s, and I couldn't find it. So I kind of thought of what was stemming from it, which was joy and culture. And Juan Gabriel was a person, an artist, a queer icon that from all throughout Latin America people resonated with. So that was the jumping point. But what went into programming was, let's move away from border stories and migration stories. Those are really important, and I think you still will see that in the film program. But more so, what are the intergenerational relationships that happen in Bolivia, in a Quechua community, and also in Mexico, in a house full of 7 women of all different ages, but also queer representation.
Okay, I have 2 that I want to get into real quick. The first one we were talking about, how is queerness represented? Jaripeo.
Oh, jaripeo?
Can you talk about jaripeo and kind of just because I'm so excited for this film. I hope everyone has it circled. Maybe not everyone because I need my seat, but tell me about this movie and what you want to share by programming it.
Totally. So jaripeos are really big in Mexico. This film specifically is about this queer artist who grew up in Michoacan and in the jaripeo, so Mexican rodeo culture. And so it's a documentary, both personal but also capturing queer representation in queer communities that are still in this hyper-masculine setting. Because jaripeos typically are very hyper-masculine and machistas. And so it's this personal take, but also showing that there's so many other identities that come to these spaces.
Crecer en un rancho, crecer en un pueblo, empezar a descubrir que te gustan los hombres es una sensación de culpa un poco. Después es una sensación de adrenalina.
Can I ask you also, there's another film that, well, there's two more, but I want people to get excited about The Blue Trail.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So The Blue Trail is this film from Brazil. It's in Portuguese, and it's basically about how the country overall, once elders get to a certain age, they get sent to these encampments, communities. You don't actually really get to see them because there's our protagonist who said peace out and actually runs away and goes on her own adventure. And so it's quite an experience that she takes on.
O que está acontecendo aqui? Senhora Teresa, dona da casa? É uma homenagem do governo.
Homenagem?
É, por conta da sua idade.
Mas desde quando uma pessoa é homenageada só porque ficou velha?
But thematically, it's talking about how society will throw away elders and older folks after they get to a certain age and kind of they become outcasts.
If a society knows about that story and we could resonate, I feel like it may be the U.S. Thinking about how invisible our elders are and can be. And then the last one I want to ask you about, because I feel like it's super fresh. I haven't seen much like it. I think it's coming from New York. Very New York, Mad Bills to Pay.
Too hard. I ain't never had my father, so I ain't gonna have my kid go through that. Like, hell no.
Wait, no, we got this.
Yeah, so Mad Bills to Pay or Destiny, Dile que no soy malo. I love that title. The parentheses. It is a coming-of-age story coming from New York, but of Dominican descent. And we have our protagonist who's 19 and gets a 16-year-old girlfriend pregnant. And so it's like them navigating adulthood when they're not actually adults yet, but also him trying to reckon with what fatherhood means and looks like to him when he didn't have a father. Money, like Mad Bills to Pay, how it says. And what's really cool is the director used non-traditional actors. So for many of the actors in this film, this is their first time acting. And you feel like that personality coming through.
Yeah, the trailer and everything I've seen about it just feels really fresh and bold and like breaking rules and like without regard of how people kind of like take it.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are ones I'm very excited about. Is there something about you or like Jimmy, audience, go check this out, you can't sleep on this?
Well, I think you're like right on the money with those films. If you also enjoy more like personal documentaries, Traces of Home is about this artist based in the Midwest, and she comes from a Palestinian father and Mexican mother, and they travel to both of her parents' homelands, and also just kind of unpack their own relationship with each other, but also home. And the shorts are a lot of fun. It's a mixed bag of like body dysmorphia to Que Monito, who was an icon in the luchador scene, and yeah.
I saw like the luchador and the body dysmorphia, and I'm like, dude, there's so much going on here, but I'm so happy for it. You know, I want to circle back because for a long time, Cine was not programmed by anyone local. And it felt like there was a distance between what we were getting and kind of like our stamp, our Milwaukee stamp almost on it. Because it's very Mexican, but we're also much more the Mexican Americans here in Milwaukee. And the other thing is, like, it was started by two local people that there was a lot of fallout, and there was a community fallout that happened because of that. And, you know, you're connected to those folks. And so can you talk about the importance of having this also locally sourced and kind of rebuilding community trust and what an event like this kind of does to, like, bring in the South Side, bring in Latinos, bring in people that support Cine?
Yeah, I think I have so much admiration and gratitude to Claudia and Jeanette for so long programming events that were really essential in the community. Like, I mean, I was under 21, but trying to pop into these spaces and like, what I mean, when the film festival was during my birthday, like, that's how I would spend my birthday, was bringing my family to go see Ruben Blades' film or Chavela. So I feel really honored that, like, I'm somebody from the community and always want to put community forward, and knowing that, yeah, like, Milwaukee and the South Side is very Mexican, but also there's so many more identities. I mean, I'm also Nicaragüense. We have a lot of Central American communities in here. We got Boricua communities. And so, I mean, I hope that the community enjoys it. I hope it feels explorative, but also something that you can go back home and talk to your communities, your family, your homies about.
Paula Lovo is the programmer of Milwaukee Film's Cine Sin Frontera. She spoke with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. Milwaukee Film is a financial supporter of WUWM. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We've all heard of Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll learn about another Wisconsinite who helped make Earth Day possible for the last 50 years. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.